When the script came to you, what's the first thing you thought? Like like obviously you did a director's pass, so like when it came to you, like did you want to do the project? Was it immediate yes? Like did you what kind of ideas running through your head?
Came to me through my manager who knew the production company. And so I knew it was
Mhm.
Spectrovision, and I knew that Elijah was going to be Bill. And I knew, it was also about Bundy. And my first thought was like, another Bundy movie. And then my second thought was like me directing a Bundy movie. It was, so I was definitely like, and then I read it, and I had a take, and I was like, I had a version that I wanted to make. And so I thought, fuck it, I'll go in there, I'll pitch my version. If they like it, great. If they don't, no problem. So I went in there and pitched it, and I said at the end, something, I was like, listen, like, I don't care if you hire me or not, but like, you need to hire a woman director. You cannot, in this day and age, have a movie about two white men sitting in a room talking about raping and murdering women and not have a female director. And they were like, oh, we totally agree, like, we're on board. And I was like, okay, cool. But I went in there, there's some jobs where you want them, you're just so desperate. There's some jobs where you're like, I want this job, but if they don't like my take, then I'm not a good fit for it. And this was one of those, and luckily they liked my take, and I liked them. So I was obviously, I had heard of Spectrovision. We had friends in common, and I knew that they were good people. And then in the meeting, I got the sense that I was like, oh, they're also artists. They also like really love film for film's sake, and I felt like, it was not just about capitalizing on the cultural interest in Bundy. It was about like, we want to make a different film that says something different about Bundy, and also is an art piece, is a film for its own sake. And so I was like, great, and it all happened really fast after that. I mean, they hired me, like, I think I met them on a Thursday or Friday. I met their other partners like that weekend, and I was hired by like the Sunday. So it was quick.
I know that you said the female director part, but I said this to Luke this morning. I was like, in no other movie would you have anyone else would have done that shot of the woman in the interview listening to the two people glorifying, like just making a circus out of this event of this interview, and then you cut to the girl, and I remember her when she started crying, I started crying. I was like,
Oh,
this hurts. This hurts so much.
because that was, in a sense, I was like, because I haven't, I mean, obviously, I've seen some true crime stuff. There's some stuff that, everyone's watching, so you watch it, and I like it, but I'm not like a person that particularly follows serial killers or is, buying
Mm.
books about them or anything. And so I really wanted to infuse like almost my perspective of like, what is it like to be a woman in this society who knows what it feels like to walk down a dark alley and be afraid if there's someone behind you, right? Like every woman knows that feeling, and also knows that like we're living in a society that's obsessed with people like Bundy, and so, I just was like, well, what's it like for the women to be observing the society obsessed with the Bundy people? And so that was what I was really trying to capture. And that girl was awesome. She was just a background actor. And
Ooh.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and she was great. And because we didn't have, budget wise,
Mm.
we had to spend a lot of our budget on COVID safety. And so we,
Mm.
everything got squeezed, and that meant, the number of actors that we could cast got squeezed. And so, we had to use our background actors as the women in the movie, the
Mm.
victims. And I don't know if that was picked up, but basically all those women, I dress them like actual victims, so that, and the point is that they're sort of, they are taking increasingly bigger and bigger looks at us, the audience, and asking us, why are
Yeah.
you so fascinated with this guy?
Oh my, yeah, I thought that moment was super powerful. And now that I'm even thinking about it, the little cuts you did to like just women standing
Mhm.
around, just like looking back at the character. Now I'm like,
Yeah.
in my mind, like, were you making us feel like this a serial killer, like a person who's obsessed? And I'm like, I'm super interested in how you put people in that perspective because I have a lot of opinions about the movie, like, but I would love to hear what some of your thoughts about how you crafted like some of these moments.
Yeah, I mean, it was really important to me that we they were basically, like I said, the victims. We dressed those
Mhm.
women as much as we could. We copied like the most iconic photos of the victim, and because I just felt like I just can't make this movie without some very strong presence of the victims, but they're not written into the script at all. And it felt cheesy to sort of write them in. And I didn't want to do the typical like list of their names at the end of the movie. I just felt like
Mhm.
that'd been done. And I was like, how can I sort of impart this like importance of them, and kind of honor them in a way that's not cheesy and it's not offensive, and and it felt poignant enough, and so we had the women, like I said, dress in outfits very similar, or as close as we could get it to the actual victims. And then it's sort of, as you watch the movie, it grows, right? Like the first woman is just a passing, she just looks, and she kind of looks at Bill, and you don't think anything of it. And my hope is that in the film, it lands on the woman who looks straight to camera, because she's first looking just at Bundy and Dobson, and then she eventually turns and looks at us, because I wanted there to be that feeling of us going like, oh, I'm complicit is not exactly the right word, but we all, as audience members and members of society, where we put our attention matters, and that's really all I guess I was trying to say. It's just like, where you put your money matters, where you put your attention matters.
On that too, like, with the shots of the victims looking at camera and stuff like that, like, I feel like the payoff to that was that scene where Bundy is holding Bill and he's telling him the story, and Bill is repeating the story, almost becoming Bundy in that moment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, in my mind, what I thought was, oh, if we don't say anything or we don't do anything, we're becoming this. Like, we're complicit in it. And
we have to make a choice. Yeah, no, that's totally accurate. I mean, we have to make a choice, especially now, right? Like, to be good and do good. Like we're so divided, and emotionally, politically, even right now coming out of the pandemic, some people are refusing to wear masks, insisting on masks. It's like it's complicated, and I think we have to really strive to do good and be good. And I think it's quite easy to not, for any of us. But that the sort of under the water monologue, as we called it, when Bundy takes Bill under the water, that moment was really important to me, because I felt like I didn't want to just sit and watch, I mean, you can watch Luke do anything. He's a genius. We could watch him. But then to me, it would get into sort of, what's the word? Like gore porn, just watching him describe. And I thought, oh, wow, Bill could be a surrogate for like us, the audience, there needs to be somebody that's processing like how awful the shit that he's saying is. So, on the outside, of course, Bill's not crying. He's sitting and listening and doing his job and being professional. But I thought, what if we cut to sort of internally what's happening for Bill? Because it was horrible for Bill to have to hear all that stuff. And Bill then gets to act as a surrogate for the women in the audience who, have maybe lived through that kind of thing, or, the victims even, it's all kind of very meta, but that was really important to me, that we didn't just, that we kind of stepped outside of reality during that, the darkest point of the film, where we hear the gruesomeness of it, I don't know if that makes any sense.
But... No, it makes sense. The meta-ness worked so well because you planted it in such a subtle way. Like, with that very first glance where that woman walks in and looks at Bill, that's when I first started to like get the idea that the audience is a member in this. So the shots in the room with Bundy, in the interrogation room, I noticed that there's a distinct difference in the amount of movement in each, like I would say 3, right? Like there's like 3 main scenes, like when...
Yeah, 4, including the last one,
Yeah. How did you decide to shoot that? Because I noticed in the first one there's not many close-ups and there's not a lot of movement, but there's a lot of like the shot choices are super interesting to me. And then the second one you start to introduce camera movement, and then the third one you start to do blocking where people are walking around. So I wanted to know, like, was that like when you were constructing those shots, like what were you thinking? Because obviously a lot of this takes place in a room. So curious to know like how you went about designing those shots and what the first thing you thought of when you read a script and it's like all room.
Yeah. I mean, to me it was exciting. I like limitations, because I'm like, okay, great. Then you can break the rules within these parameters. So I was like, great. All we have is this room, 2 chairs, a table, 2 actors, and they barely get up from the table. But for me, the choreography and the shot list, the choreography of the camera was really all about a representation of where their relationship was at. So in the beginning, it's much more like locked off, wide, so you have the under the elbow shot, because basically at that point, Bundy is still an enigma to Bill. Bill has not yet figured him out, right? And so I was like, okay, let's use that. Let's have this obscure, Bundy hides behind his hands. We see him through the armpit. We're still trying to like peer through all the crap to figure out who is Bundy. So that was what I was trying to get the camera work in that scene to kind of emulate. And then as the relationship gets closer, then the camera starts to move. It's got a softer feel, right? It starts to rotate around them. They meet. There's a sort of circleness to it, a unification of the two of them. And then, as you'll see, then I started to do the slider stuff where they are kind of merging, and that was because that's when Bill is really asking himself the big question of like, could I kill someone? Am I like Ted? You know, because Ted's saying, look, buddy, you're like me too. You're just making different choices. You could be me. And so that's when I started to incorporate the, you know, still the movement, but much more like merging, kind of bringing them together. And then the final scene was just all about extreme close-ups and more frenetic energy, because that's when it was, you know, he's about to die. And that's when they really know each other. And so that's when I got into the, like, you know, that kind of stuff. Cause it was like, all right, there's no bullshit. It's just the two of them. We don't even need to see the room anymore behind them. So it was like, you know, we planned all that ahead of time. It was like figuring out, okay, this scene, the relationship is like this. So the camera's going to be this and, you know, yada, yada, yada.
As a filmmaker, how do you feel like this project has helped you grown, has helped you grow as a filmmaker, and which any lessons that you might carry on to your next project?
I mean, tons, you know, every film is a learning process, you know, I think of them all as their own beasts, you know, and I mean, this one was just, it was so fun and so hard on so many levels. I mean, it was like the first time almost all of us had been back, you know, with other humans. We all had been like locked in our apartments, our houses for 6-7 months, I think, before we got together. So it was very much like a coming back to life feeling. And I think for that reason, like, I'll be forever grateful to this film, because it was just like I mean, it was kind of the thing that saved a lot of us during the pandemic, because, you know, so much of our industry had shut down. And, I mean, I just think you learn something from every movie. You know, there's always like, I would have done this differently. I would have done that, you know, so it's hard to kind of say. I mean, I think every movie I do sort of helps me solidify, like, what's my style, you know, how I like to do it. But this film, it was just, you know, Luke and Elijah are just, they're so wonderful. They're such great actors and so lovely and smart. And, you know, and the whole of SpectraVision, that whole team is just, you know, they're true artists and they love film and they really supported my vision. And that was just such a great experience.